It got very.
Okay. Give Andy a big hand.
Yay.
And see if what I'm going to say is, see if we give them a big hand now, they won't make any errors for sure, right? So give Travis and Danny Kadar and the whole New Orleans Jazz Museum and the Mint. They do a great job. You find yourself at the 23rd annual Satchmo Summerfest presented by the New Orleans Tourism and Cultural Fund. This is the only festival in Louisiana dedicated to Louis Armstrong, and it's produced by French Quarter Festivals, a nonprofit showcasing New Orleans culture and heritage since 1980. So next year will be their 40th anniversary. Mm-hmm. Yes, give them a big hand. This festival is made possible through the generosity of our sponsors and supported through your purchase of official festival merchandise. I told them to get their bucket hats. I don't see any.
Not yet.
Yeah, later today. And beverages, so please do that to help us out. You were at the Satchmo Legacy stage in memory of Joni Berry. Joni was a great friend of the Satchmo Summerfest. She was a dancer and dance advocate. If you have a program, if you look on the back, there's a nice little biography of her there. And her foundation, the Joseph K. and Inez Eichenbaum Foundation, is one of the main sponsors of this stage, along with Mr. Stephen Maitland-Lewis, who is here. Give him a big hand. Also, the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation, and Richard and Vicki Narigian, who I'm sure are watching from
Mahwah, New Jersey.
Mahwah, New Jersey. They support us every year. And so a big hand for our sponsors. If you were here in 2021, Chris Renshaw here gave us kind of like the sausage making of how does one produce a musical for Broadway. And he has a lot of experience in that. He produced, let's see, Taboo, which was a musical with words and music by Boy George. And then he did Zorro with music by the Gypsy Kings, which toured all over Britain and opened in the West End and played all over Europe and Asia and Atlanta, which is neither Europe nor Asia.
True.
In 2016, he directed the world premiere of Carmen La Cubana, the first Cuban musical at, I just wanted to speak French here, at the Théâtre du Châtelet in Paris. Is that right? How's that?
Amazing.
I'm very debonair, but I don't speak French. In 2021 it debuted?
We had a few false starts with COVID, but it's about, I think it's 2021.
Yeah, in December in Miami. And after the show, after this presentation, get your thing out, go to Saenger thing. There's tickets still available. It'll premiere here in New Orleans. His Louis Armstrong musical Wonderful World will premiere in New Orleans October 1st through the 8th, eight shows. Is that correct?
Yep.
And here to talk to him about it further is, you know him as an author, archivist, and all-around good fellow, Mr. Ricky Riccardi and Mr. Christopher Renshaw. Oh, that's right. He won a Grammy. Is Grammy Man here?
He's not here this
Oh,
time.
thank goodness.
That guy, man, he's retired. They don't let him out of the house anymore. Welcome, thank you. Hello, Chris. How you doing?
Good, good, good.
For those who weren't here in 2021, I think we should kind of go back to the beginning. Does that sound good?
Yes.
So I'll
A
just
very good place to start.
right. I'll ask probably the most obvious question: why Louis Armstrong?
It was a series of karmic accidents. It all started when I met a wonderful friend who became a wonderful friend in a bar, and over in Manhattan. He said, "Oh, you direct?" And I said, "Yes, I now live in Miami. I live in Miami, having lived LA and New York, but for various odd reasons, I live in Miami." And I met this guy, and he said, "Oh, you should do a musical." So I immediately met the local theater, which is a wonderful place called Miami New Drama. And they said, "Oh, yeah, I live right near the Fly Tower." And he said, "Do you have a musical?" And I said, "I don't." So I thought I'd better go and find one. So my friend Andrew introduced me to some his sister and brother-in-law, and he's not a theatre guy, but he loves jazz and has a jazz lesson every morning on the piano. And he said, if you do a musical about Louis Armstrong, I'll pay for it. Now, a director doesn't refuse that kind of thing. It's music to one's ears. It was magic, but I was overwhelmed by the enormity of the subject. Not just because Louis, as you all know, is just staggering genius and an American and international icon, and all that with a massive oeuvre. I mean, I looked at the recordings he made, and it's in the thousands. So I initially said no, I couldn't. And also, when I was reading books, including yours, I realized that the story of Louis is not only the story of a great artist, but the story of a century. Interesting, my century, and I was obviously born in Britain, you can probably tell from the fake accent, but it gave me an objectivity into that century, and I thought, oh my God, what a story. What he went through, what he achieved, what was going on in the world from 1901 to 72 was amazing. And that made me even more nervous. I thought, it's just too much. Especially, I'll be honest, I'm not a jazz guy. I was an opera guy. Then I did a musical with Queen, so I had to learn rock. Then I did a musical with Boy George. Then I did a musical with the Gypsy Kings. So I've always learned. So I thought, well, perhaps I can learn. Mm-hmm. But I still didn't know a way in. Every musical needs a way in. And then it suddenly dawned on me that Mr. Armstrong had 4 wives. And I thought, that might be a gift. So I presented to Miami New Drama a concept that each wife would show her version or her love or her enjoyment of this great man in 4 stages of his life. You probably know all this already because you're such experts. But his first wife was here, Daisy Parker, extraordinary woman. And there's a lot written about her. Louis, and they know all this. Louis wrote.
No, go tell him.
Oh, you don't know? Daisy was one of my favorite characters. She's become my favorite character in history. She was a prostitute because that was all. You either were a prostitute, or you cleaned. It was a terrible time. But she loved life. And she loved Louis, and I thought, that's great. You could almost do a musical just about Louis in New Orleans, if I'm pronouncing it right. It's bearable. It's New Orleans.
That's
New Orleans.
You're doing fine.
So I got a bit of, that gave me my what he writes about New Orleans is amazing. He writes about it so beautifully, so dramatically, and so colorfully, and you just love him and you love Daisy. His second wife, as I'm sure you know, was in Chicago. He was part of the Great Migration, went into Chicago. There he met an extraordinary pianist called Lil Hardin, who really helped him refine his art. And how much of this is, he writes about this too, so let's be honest. She really turned him from the real gumbo a musician of New Orleans into a very slick and elegant man. He got a bit tired of her. Then he met a lady about whom we know very little, Alpha Smith, and I'm longing to see Ricky later and get more info on Alpha, but we made her, she was not a gold digger, but she was a maid he met in Chicago who liked the finer things of life. And I think they did love each other, but she eventually had too many finer things, and including his drummer. And she went off with his drummer. It's all good play stuff, this, that's why it's such an interesting story, because it's not just, how wonderful a musician he is, because it gets a bit boring. He's an artist, he's Mozart, he's one of the greatest artists of all time. And then his final wife, I'm sure you know about, the wonderful Lucille, who helped him settle down and find a home, which is basically the kernel of our story, Louis searching for a home. That was a long answer.
Well, we're out of time, but
oh, nice to meet you. So that's how it happened, and we did it at Miami New Drama, and then it's been taken up by our great producer, Carl White, who's here. And we've got 2 dates which follow Lewis's trajectory, New Orleans and then Chicago. And then, with God's will, we'll be in New York next year. And that's the story of the musical.
Amazing. Why don't you tell us about the writer? Who actually wrote
The book, the play is by Oren Squire, who's a very, very smart TV writer. He wrote This Is Us. He writes Evil. He wrote The Good Life, The Good Fight. A wonderful writer, born in Miami. And he and I kind of went through the material and found a sort of plot, which he made me tell backwards, which I was the most extraordinary. He said, tell it backwards. And strangely, it hasn't changed a lot. It was very, very good early work, which is pretty amazing for a musical, which normally change 360 degrees.
Well, I was going to ask, did anybody here see it in Miami? Oh, okay. All right. So we got anything people should expect, any big changes from Miami to New Orleans, or any shifts besides cast and stuff like that?
Yes, cast. I think the women are... our progress in rewriting was to try and deepen the women first, so that they really felt like genuine people. They were before, but our first task was making sure that they were real, and that the relationship between him and them and Lewis was very real and emotional and centered. We're still working on it. What we're doing now is enriching Lewis as a character. So we learn more about his music. But my interest was all, I mean, the music is a given in a way, but we must show that. But what I was trying to do was who the man was behind the trumpet. Right. And I bet you knew him, presumably, did you? Did you know
Personally,
Lewis?
I was born 9 years after he died.
Oh. Well, I know Stephen knew him, and he's told me wonderful stories. So we're trying to make him more front and center and try and understand what made him tick, which is hard to know, because everybody who met him said he was the most delightful and gorgeous and wonderful, funny, charming person. Right. Now, that doesn't make for great drama. You know, you don't want to sit all night and watch a lovely, charming person. So we've dug into his politics, into his final stand for his people, in the famous speech he made on the tarmac after the Little Rock scandal, and so we're digging in to try and find a man. It won't be the whole man. Nothing can be.
Of course.
But we're trying to, and people who did see it in Miami thought, I thought he played the trumpet. I didn't know he was all that, and so complex and so brave, and he lived through the worst century for, you know, black people anywhere, and, you know, I don't play where I don't stay and all that stuff. So that's what so it's enriched.
From a music standpoint, how did you go about selecting the song?
Well, it's kind of a little, I mean, we're in a friendly space, so I'll tell you the real truth. It's horrible. I mean, apart from the songs I loved, and I said, I want that, I wanted Body and Soul. I said, I can't do this show without Body and Soul. We can't do it without A Wonderful World. And so we had this sort of plot of how to get through. It was 4 chapters. Each wife has her own chapter, 2 in Act 1 and 2 in Act 2. So I got the whole list of all his recordings, which I'm sure you know, which is about 20. It's a big and I printed it. And the songs I didn't know. So when you write a musical, you say, here is a song about Lucille's disappointment in the fact he doesn't appreciate his home as much. You know, I wanted a song about that. So I went through all the Lewis songs and found one with home in it. So you sort of, and then you pick them out and put the lyrics on a bit of paper on the wall, and then you start altering them. And it worked pretty well. A couple of, we had a very interesting moment when I needed an entrance song for King Joe Oliver. And there was one, I can't remember its name now, but we didn't get the rights. The publisher said no. So this is what the magic of the musical is. I found a track, which I'm sure you know, by Lewis, called King of the Zulus. So we used that. We put a few very simple words to it, and it works really well, especially knowing that Louis Armstrong became the Zulu on the parade. It was one of his
Mardi Gras,
yeah. So I thought
1941.
Zulu was quite a good Louis sort of thing, and Joe Oliver is talking to him about how he can conquer the world. So it's a bit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was when you see it, not if you see it, when you see it, there will be songs that you want to hear but aren't in, partly because we couldn't, some rights you can't get, and also because otherwise the show would be four days long.
Well, that's another question I had. A term you hear a lot thrown around is jukebox musical. Does that make you shudder, or does that?
I'm the king of them.
Okay, I just wasn't sure where you stood.
Well, we were, We Were Rock You, and
Right.
I did Taboo, and it's become a sort of it can be pejorative. The trick, and where I think I'm experienced, and my musical collaborators are so experienced, is making you think that the song has been written for the moment, and that's how it's arranged, how you get into the song. I mean, the ultimate jukebox musical, in my opinion, was Mamma Mia, which almost had a joy of saying, we're a little bit short of money today. Oh, money. That you have to avoid. So you have to try and feel that it belongs to that moment. And I enjoy doing it. And the other truth is there's very few new. I mean, now Mr. Sondheim is gone and Miss Jerry Herman's gone. There aren't many composers that can actually get their music onto Broadway because it's so expensive. And so look, I wouldn't have wanted to do a musical about Mr. Armstrong without the music he sang and made famous.
Well, let's talk about cast. How do you find Louis Armstrong?
It's not easy. We have found a wonderful artist who's got a Tony called James Iglehart, James Monroe Iglehart, great actor, great singer, he's famous, I think, mostly for playing a genie in Aladdin. He's a great Louis fan, and he spent a year now learning the trumpet. He will never play like Louis. But there are various tricks in the theatre to make you think you're hearing things, and he is going to play, and he's amazing, and he's obviously learnt how to make his voice sound like it, and also having lessons to make sure he doesn't hurt himself,
Right.
because it really hurts going down there, So he's fantastic.
Who's playing? Who's doing the heavy lifting in the trumpet chair in the orchestra?
We're just casting that person now. We'll have two, and one you'll see on stage a bit. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the question I always have. When you think of Louis Armstrong coming out, singing, playing, acting, doing comedy,
It's a hard. That's why you can't show everything of him.
Yeah.
I mean, Louis still remains him. Louis is still Louis, and you can't copy him. But you've got to open doors to other parts of his character, apart from his genius on the trumpet, which we want to hear.
Right.
But I'm very interested what was in Louis's soul.
Yeah. And aside from the wives, we mentioned King Oliver, some of the other characters, Joe Glazer, Johnny Collins.
Yes, people you probably knew Joe Glazer. Did you?
Me?
Yes.
I was born 11 years after Joe Glazer.
Oh, well, I forget you're a
I didn't
child.
know anybody. I know Stephen.
Yes, Joe Glazer, Joe Oliver, all the wives, Johnny Collins, who was Louis's first Irish manager, amazing creature, when he writes about him being so drunk he could hardly stand up. So I have fun with him. He doesn't come out great, but that's all right. I think Joe Glazer was an extraordinary man and very clever. We all know his history, and he has a colourful history. I think what I try and show is, despite Mr. Glazer, whose company still exists, besides his colourful parts of his life, I think they cared about each other. He became the sort of father he always needed. Yeah.
And how, there's certain parts of Louis's career almost feel like minefields. Like, how'd you deal with Hollywood?
Well, we try. Obviously, the Great Depression, he went to Hollywood, that's true, and I think he thought it was going to be easier. We don't show any of his less tasteful movies, but when we first see him in Hollywood, he's involved in his beautiful Chicago suit, looking elegant and great. But there's a rather dubious movie being shot, which we're placing kind of Afro-Caribbean. We haven't quite decided what they're wearing yet, but Lewis is kind of puzzled by this. He thinks, why is this so backward? And and then he meets a great well, I think he's a great artist, Lincoln Perry, who says, if you can't beat him, join him. So that's Hollywood, really. And he conquers that, as he should conquer everything.
And Lincoln Perry is Step and Fetch It.
Yes, we don't say that much.
Okay, got it. Yeah, well,
You probably don't remember Step and Fetch It, but I love these old vaudeville acts, and Step and Fetch It has been very hated over the years for what he did, but he was only doing what he needed to do to earn money at a very difficult period, and he has been reevaluated by the NAACP, and as an actor, when he wasn't doing that character, he was elegant, fast, and so all good stuff.
Oh, of course.
And they did meet.
Yes. Yeah, no, we have them on tape together too. So.
Oh, hello. Here's my friend. That's good. I'm very pleased about that. Because he knew Bojangles quite well.
Oh, yeah. No,
he loved
was
Bojangles.
well versed in that world, for sure. Let's go back to the cast. Who should people expect to see portraying the four wives?
Well, you may know them. They're all Broadway names. Khalifa White and then Jenny. They all come from, like, they've all been in Lion King, Hamilton. They've got the real provenance of, and they're wonderful. We did a reading last week in New York, and they're stunning. And they're all as different as his real wives were. That's the key,
Right.
And you have to push truth a little bit.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed you have some slides. Would you like to show the...
Let's see if I'm not very good at these things. Let's see if it works. Yeah, so here's some photos of, this is a model of our set. So the show starts with A Wonderful World, obviously, and there's the world and his trumpet. Then through the scrim, I love theatrical models. They're just wonderful. You see the four wives remembering him in their different ways as they sing A Wonderful World. There they are round the sacred trumpet. That's New Orleans. So we have you can probably see it up there. What you call Spanish moss, which we do with I don't know whether I can say this anymore. Ladies' underwear, because we are, in all sense and purposes, in a brothel. Let's have them have it. It's Daisy and Lewis. That's the riverboat. Is that the riverboat? Yes, I think so. No, that's the Funky Butt. Let me see. Do you know the Funky Butt? I wish it was still here. I'd go tonight. I just love the title, The Funky Butt, where so much great jazz was born. What a world this must have been then. There's the riverboat. Where he spent many days on the riverboat, going up and down, taught by Fate Marable, another wonderful name, who was a disciplinarian, and he learned to read music, which was considered shameful for a jazz musician. Quite agree. Now we see how we changed to Chicago. So here we are. What was it? Lincoln?
Lincoln Gardens.
Lincoln Gardens.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be my assistant on this. You'd be wonderful. Wikipedia, yes. This is a great scene where he and his band are arrested by the cops in Memphis, and he gets to do a Memphis benefit concert to escape jail, and he sings, of course, You Rascal You, and the cops adore him for it, and it's all good fun. Here we are in Hollywood, lots of projections. Oh, this is Alpha in our version, knows how to control him by promising him a baby. So that's the way she kind of has a control over him. So they make love a lot, and obviously to making whoopee. It's all good, clean fun. There's the Cotton Club, where I don't. You'll know if this is true, but Lucille was a dancer at the Cotton Club in her early days, so we thought that was a good thing to recall. That Lucille, she didn't like dancing, as far as I know, but she was a Cotton Club dancer. This is a scene where Joe Glazer and Lewis now rule the world, and they're giving press interviews, and he's then Ambassador Satch. So you see all the, and we're not going to use his, so I don't know what, I think this is Lewis's face, but it won't be Lewis, it will be James Iglehart as Lewis. So we're doing photo shoots to create that. Here we are this is the Queen's house, and all these images change, and he sings Black and Blue. This is the most poignant part of the show, is where he learns about the Little Rock riots and loses his temper and stands up for injustice, which I think redeems any whispers of of him not being proud of his race. He was proud of being a human. That's what's amazing about Lewis. He was a great human, and for that century with that time is amazing. And right at the end, there we go, stars, whole cast, Lewis singing and playing A Wonderful World as he reaches heaven and finally finds home. So that's our show. That's the full set.
I don't know, does anybody have any questions? Alan?
Well, first off, congratulations. It's a real monumental task that you have trying to set out to put on a musical. I wanted to go back to the music. I know that in the past I've heard that it's been very difficult to get the rights to Louis Armstrong's music. And I know in particular you were looking for certain things that the people who own the copyrights have been less than generous in terms of working. Have you experienced anything along those lines at all?
No. I mean, you work through the publishing houses, and they're used to that, and we've been very supported by the music publishers, who have the right to license their music for any show. You don't get everything you want, because some songs that he did record are in other shows, so you can't use them because they're already licensed, or a particular song they don't want out of its context. But no, they've been the music publishers have been very, very generous and very interested and very kind. That's real truth.
When people leave the theater, what song do you think they're going to be humming?
Wonderful World. But you hear it every day. It's become like...
I heard it 3 times on the walk over.
Yes. Yes. I only do shows that you hear in cafes and taxis.
Smart.
Hello?
Wait, we're gonna because we're streaming. I'm gonna hand you the microphone for you to ask your question.
Oh, great.
So we'll start here.
So on the previous show that when you spoke last time, you had some previews, and the previous actor who played Louis did not necessarily go into the gravelly voice. He had more of a Broadway voice, as it were. And now you're mentioning that the new actors coming in is going to have more of what people expect from Louis Armstrong's voice. Is that?
That is true.
Yeah. Is that something that he had to hard work for, or was that some response that you had from the audiences to make that change?
Original Lewis was great, absolutely fantastic. James has now been working on this for a year, whereas we cast the previous actor, he only had about 4 weeks. And Iglehart takes this very seriously, so he's digging in deep. And yes, obviously Lewis doesn't start with that voice, and I'm sure Ricky knows why he got it, because he was addicted to Friar's Balsam, is what I've read, and we've put that in the show now. I don't know whether it's true. It's a good story.
I've heard Scott's Emulsion, but
Scott's Emulsion.
Yeah.
Oh, can you remind me? He had but we're mentioning that, and we're also thinking about what he must have felt when he changed voice and how it affected him. Yeah, so.
And the bigger question is, will the soundtrack be ready by the time it debuts in New Orleans?
I'll sing it for you.
Yeah. Let's keep those questions coming. Anybody else?
One more. Hold on.
Oh, John's got it covered.
Yeah, I was just curious. I came in late. Is it scheduled for debuting in New Orleans?
Yes. We've got the theatre for 3 weeks, but we take 2 weeks to do the technical stuff. So we've only got 8 performances here. But the first a first pre-Broadway opening is on October the 6th. So we will be here, and how amazing. And the second song in the show is Basin Street, a song I love. That's the big street party celebration of Mr. Armstrong. And I've heard that the stage door is in Basin Street. Yeah. So that is just fantastic. Amazing.
Yeah, I saw it in Miami, and I remember walking out after seeing it. This is not Broadway material. It seemed to have covered some of the issues I had with one, enrichment of the characters.
Yes.
And I was comparing it to Beautiful, the Carole King musical, and but I think you've done what seems to be a really good
Well, I
job.
hope you see it again, and
Yeah, I wish
we'll
I
be
could.
learning on the road as well, and
Yeah.
we will be listening. My producer was talking to me last night, and you learn so much on the road. And when we open on Broadway, we will obviously be thinking about what we've learned. So a thing isn't. Yes, well, we tried twice. The first time we didn't open because of COVID. That was we closed on March the 13th. Which year was bloody COVID?
2020.
And then we did it again a year and a half later, and we opened, which is fantastic that we opened. But then we got shut down again. I mean, so we've had a very COVID. So we haven't been able to really work on it because we kept shutting, except in workshops. But it has developed, and it was enrichment of characters that I wanted.
Just give me a minute.
Oh.
Getting my steps in.
You're delicate. Hello.
Hi. Are there also plans to take it to Europe? You don't need to go to that unpronounceable French place, but London would be awesome.
As far as we've talked to people, London is very, very interested because he was so popular in London and such a treasure. I think I'm right. It's very interesting. I was nervous sitting next to Ricky. But my memory is that it was London that dubbed him Satchmo.
Percy Brooks, the
There you
melody
go.
maker, yeah.
Because they couldn't quite work out Satchel
Natural
Mouth.
mouth.
Yes, of course. I mean, but step by step, and keep healthy, keep young and beautiful, hopefully. Yes,
Give me 1 second.
Will you be doing previews in any other cities?
We got a couple in Chicago, but at the moment we open in the press night in Chicago. I can't remember the exact date. We then have 2 more weeks. So I think after that after Chicago, we will look at what we've got, and our next stop will be Broadway, we think.
I only ask because I'm from Chicago.
And you can't get up there. Oh, you can?
Well, that's where I live.
Oh, great.
So do you have an approximate?
Yes, I do. We do. I'm not very good at dates, but I think we open about thank you, Mr. Producer. Hey, Mr. Producer, we're looking at you, sir.
And what theater?
There you go. It's good.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It's a wonderful world.
Hi. If by chance a Broadway theater is not available, would you consider taking it off Broadway, like to the Signature or to the Public Theater?
It's too expensive. It's a very big cast, and it's not a massive show, but it's a big medium-sized show. So you need. I mean, 1,000-seater would be fine, but anything less than 1,000 is very difficult. But I'm extremely hopeful that we will find our place. Oh, you do? Oh, well, you.
Any other questions? Oh, we can keep it going there. I mean,
I've got some costume design.
please.
Just because they're great costume design, 4-time Tony nominated, and she's called Tony Leslie James. So these have only just come through. That's my favorite is Lewis on the riverboat. I can't see. That's all Lewis. Yeah, sort of Chicago look. Here's Miss Daisy. She's one of the greatest costume design. Every detail is like every shoelace is designed, cufflinks, jewelry. There's Daisy in the brothel. And there's Miss Lil, very smart, all beaded. We have a few of Alpha. The first scene is all red and black. It's not his funeral, but it has a feeling of that kind of gravity of celebration until it explodes into a second line. I love this of Lucille. It sort of, for me, says a lot about her, very ordered, very smart. There you see, we have, for those of you who really know New Orleans, Mr. Konofsky makes an appearance. And he's the same actor to keep the Jewish thing going through. You know, we all know that Lewis respected the Jewish people. So the same actor who plays Konofsky also plays Joe Glazer to keep that going through, which gives a sort of line of sort of revelers, and there's Fate Marable. That might be it. Oh no, Chicago gangster. So they're coming through. And I can't wait to see all that on stage. It'll be very classy. Yeah.
Now, compared to some of the many other musicals you've worked on, any particularly unique challenges to this one besides COVID?
Well, for me, I mean, I'll be quite honest. I mean, it's an honor and a privilege to be dealing with something that is not my culture, and my learning curve on this has been amazing. And as you get older, to be given the privilege of being allowed to enter a culture that's not mine, and being welcomed into it is amazing. And I think that's what keeps you alive. I mean, obviously it's not always easy, because you know, our cultures are very different. I mean, I'm Brit, I'm a boring old Brit. But I think that's the most special thing about this show, is having a family of people who grew up in a different way. And that is very special. And they've all, every company I've got have been a delight and a joy. And that's not bull S. It's quite moving for me. So that's, yes, I mean, that's it.
After putting in these years on this production, are you sick of Louis Armstrong's music yet?
No.
Oh, good. Right answer.
I'm only
right.
I mean, there's so much that, I mean, I'm a great fan of his Chicago period, and I think the Hot 5 and Hot 7 are works of staggering genius. And I've just put, it's only small because we don't have much real estate, but I've got him recording. I found that those huge megaphones, because there was no microphones, right. And so I have one tiny scene of Lewis playing that fabulous first riff from West End Blues into a microphone. And I was longing, I can't do it, but apparently he did record with Bessie Smith, and she said, "It's too loud, go play." But I can't, I haven't done that yet. But I love the fact that he was so loud. It was bigger sound.
Were there any tough cuts or anything that this over the years you couldn't shoehorn in?
Yes, there are. Information. Yeah. I mean, he had so much Wikipedia stuff. You know, there's every time you turn a page, there's something else, and we just can't get everything in, because otherwise it will. So I'm a kind of emotional kind of director. I like people to feel. So that's my choice at the moment. But we still have cuts to go, because the thing I don't like is keeping an audience in the theatre too long. I like shows that are 90 minutes. This has got an interval. I mean, you couldn't do Lewis without an interval, but I still have my mind on trying to keep it as snappy as it can be. Yeah. But we know, our producers know. We sit in the first preview. If it's too long, you know. Then you've got to take the shears out.
Yep.
Cuts are the best things in musicals. I love cuts. If you've got a problem and you can't solve it, if you cut it often works. The material actually tells you what you've got to do with it.
Right.
I mean, this is all hopefully. I mean, you'll probably see me staggering down Canal Street going, "Oh, God, come and help me, Ricky."
We have about 10 minutes left.
Oh, my God.
Questions, really, honestly. Yeah.
I just want to ask
Wait, Chris.
Hold on, microphones.
Where
John,
is it?
front row.
Oh, it's our New Yorker.
I just want to know if you've ever seen Ricky's presentation on the history of the song "It's a Wonderful World."
I haven't.
You must see it.
Is it on-
Everybody in
It's
this
on
room
YouTube.
must see it.
It's on YouTube.
It's good for your research,
Yeah, I will. I'm look.
and it's just a really great.
I've just got somebody texted me overnight saying they'd found the Desert Island discs.
Oh, yeah.
And that it said Riccardi loves this. I've never heard that desert. You know
Oh,
what
yeah.
Desert Island discs is? A British program where they choose your 8.
Yep.
And I've been.
Yeah, eight song, I teach this. This is
You're
my
right.
I'll do it next week because my first writing
Microphone. Use the
assignment-
microphone.
I teach at Dillard University, and my first writing assignment, it's because they can't plagiarize it. It's what would you take? We listened to Zadie Smith, the novelist, her
Yeah, great.
version. But it's 8 songs, a luxury item, and a book that is, you already get Shakespeare in the Bible.
Yes. I don't know the book he chose yet, but I know he took a trumpet.
He chose his own book, Satchmo, My Life in New Orleans.
Well, do you know what? I love that book.
Oh, me too.
Isn't it? It's so great. And that's one of the problems with the show. You love that book so much. It's hard to get out of New Orleans.
Yeah.
Because it is such a... I mean, that's what amazed me about learning about him. This town, in that period, at the beginning of the century, seemed like a whole new world. For me, read, and this is a Brit, but I felt that this town at the turn of the century was like what America could be, and it was all mixed, and things and languages were mixed, music was mixed. And you stand in Congo Square and you think, oh my God, this could have been America. And perhaps it is. I mean, there's hope. But I was so impressed by what this town was. It may be nostalgic, and it probably wasn't, but he writes about it, that even though they had no money and they were picking weeds from the railway tracks and getting scraps out of restaurants' trash cans, there was a spirit here that I think is very noble. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And you still see it here. I mean, when I arrived yesterday, people are actually nice. And the taxi driver, there was a guy who looked so much like Lewis in last night's Taxi, who was very funny and just funny and charming. I think this is a wonderful place, and may it long survive. And you know, that's, I guess the reason I did the musical was reading Satchmo's book about New Orleans, Black Benny, and all these amazing. We don't have any characters anymore. You know, we're all getting so, you know, homogenized. I mean, I live in Miami. That's as homogenized as it gets. But I do like, you know, even here, even now, walking around the streets, people are lovely and they do smile at you. And I mean, I hope they're not going to take my money, but but I'm a great fan of New Orleans, and I'd be so proud to do this here, and hopefully his spirit will hover over us at the Saenger.
Chris, I have a quick question. Could you tell me a little bit about the choreography? Because that's an integral part to any Broadway show. Who did you pick, and how is that going?
It's good. He's a younger choreographer. This will be his first Broadway show. He's called Ricky Tripp, which I think is a great name for a choreographer. He has researched the dance of the time. We have a wonderful... we did a dance workshop about 4 weeks ago. It's amazing to watch. It's very visceral. And obviously he has to travel the period, so New Orleans is obviously all our favorites because it's so down and dirty and sexual, and I mean, that's great. Then we get into Charleston's, and then we have the Hollywood stuff and tap dancing. There's not much choreography when we get to New York, but he's a great guy, and it really enriches the experience. And I love watching tap dancing. God, wonderful.
Last call for questions. Oh, John over there.
Are there any other jazz greats that appear maybe as minor characters, people like Kid Ory, folks like that?
We mention people. It was, again, a real estate problem, and we chose not to go into Ella. I mean, there's just so many, so that I've kept those to a minimum. But actually, the rewrite we're doing now, at least you'll hear names. But the jazz greats, I mean, King Joe is our main jazz great, and we just don't have enough. If I did a musical over 2 days, I could do it. And my original idea was also to introduce people like Ella and Billie Holiday, who, God, wonderful, wonderful person. But there just isn't time, especially as our choice was to enrich the Four Wives. And so little has been done on, I mean, may I say this, black women in the 20th century. And I felt that was important to show how important they are. And I wanted them to be lauded. And so that we just ran out of space.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen,
We're good.
Christopher Renshaw.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And we will, of course, Ricky Riccardi, and
Thank you.
we'll all meet. We'll all meet at the Saenger for the last 8 bars. So we'll see you at the Saenger October 1st through the 8th. And I look forward to it. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Stick around. We have next, it's With Them Cymbals Pops. It's Robert Cagliati talking about Baby Dodd, Zudi Singleton, and Paul Barbarans. We'll be back at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Wow. Yes.